everyone, welcome back to GameSpot. We are here covering E3 2018. I'm really excited. We are starting our live stage demos here today. Now, the press conferences are all sorted out. I'm Mike Mahardy. I will be here with Lucy James throughout the week. And we've got a full 3 days ahead of us of some great developers. I'm really excited for this one. Brian Tahar, creative director at Insomniac Games on Spider-Man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Great way to kick off the show.
What better way than Spider-Man? Come on.
Exactly. Yeah, what was it like showing off that trailer last night?
Nervous, panicked, but excited at the same time. We were pretty pumped.
Yeah, you got to show off, what, the Sinister Six toward the end? We saw Mr. Negative. We saw,
Rhino,
Electro,
Scorpion.
Vulture. Yeah, like the old school ones that I grew up on.
People said they want, before the show, like, we hope we see one villain. We're like, one's not enough. Let's just show,
That's awesome, and then I know you're doing hands-on demos as well, right?
Yeah, that's by far the more nerve-wracking thing is to
Yeah.
actually put the controller in people's hands and let them actually play it, because really very few people have ever played the game till last night.
Yeah. So are we going to be looking at on the demo today?
Yeah.
So actually, Adam, one of our combat designers, is going to be jumping into what do you want to do as Spider-Man? You want to swing around New York City, so he's actually going to be swinging around and doing a bunch of different activities.
Awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's been since Spider-Man 2 days, I think. It's been since it really felt like it was, I mean, there were other Spider-Man games, but that's the one that I feel like everybody's always chasing with Spider-Man.
I mean, I think for most people, that's kind of the moment that they became big Spider-Man video game fans, was actually the fulfilling that fantasy of being Spider-Man in an open world. And, obviously, we're big fans of that game and a lot of the other Spider-Man games, and we just want to take what people loved about those games, but do it in our way.
Yeah, I mean, what's it like? I mean, having to make like a superhero game in general.
I mean, it's like I said, both exhilarating and scary at the same time. I think when we first found out we were going to make Spider-Man, your instant reaction is to fanboy out and go, okay, well, I want to see this villain and I want to do this, and then reality sets in that you have to make a game on arguably one of the most popular characters in the world, and then you start to get really scared. And then you just kind of figure out, well, what do people love about the character? He's relatable, he has a sense of vulnerability, but he's also got these super awesome powers, and DNA of the character, we're also kind of putting our own twist on it.
Awesome. Well, I would love to see some gameplay. I think we're got people in the back.
Yeah, so Adam's gonna start up the demo and down and get in action.
Awesome.
Right.
So obviously we're looking here. This is Spider-Man over Manhattan, and so walk us through this.
Yeah. So essentially, last night at the Sony press conference, we showed one of our main story missions. So obviously we have our a great big story, and people will have these big missions, but at the same time, there's a whole other element to the world, and that's obviously playing in New York City and finding different activities. So people always wonder, well, it's an open world. I'm like, yes, it's a very big open world. So actually, Adam's taking you over to kind of a quick kind of combat tutorial. We want to kind of get people up to speed on. So, one thing is, our ear, so he definitely has a level of mastery with his skills. It's all about him being an improviser, using acrobatics, using webs, using gadgets, and then a lot of environment action to let you kind of have a lot of player choice as you're going. So Adam makes it look really, really good, and we wanted players to have that sense of, obviously, a pick up and play nature to it, but also, as you get really good, you can do things like we saw in that Raph demo last night.
Right.
Yeah, what are some places you look for inspiration for combat?
I think, obviously we look at the DNA of the character, right? He's very acrobatic. We want to get him off the ground. We want to use his webs, but then we look at, some great action games, Yes, we have played Batman. Everybody,
yeah.
We would be silly not to play Batman and look at that game because it's a franchise. But also looking at things like Devil May Cry, and any big third-party, action game, we just look at and look for inspiration. But at the same time, make it our own. One thing is, it was a GameSpot article I read, and it was it was like 8 things we want to see in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the bullet points being, we want it to feel like an Insomniac game, or it was something like that.
Yeah.
So it was really important to us to deliver on the Spider-Man fantasy, but also deliver on what people expect from an Insomniac game. So, you're going to see a lot of gadgets, you're going to see a lot of suit powers, suit modifications, to add that tech, that gadget that not only Spider-Man known for, but so are we. And it was actually an article, not to say, But it was something I actually sent out to the team going, people want it to be an Insomniac game as much as they want it to be a Spider-Man game. So we found that, and that's when kind of the game really gelled, is kind of taking what we love about Spider-Man, what we love about the games that we make, and bringing them together. I mean, obviously, Traversal was very much inspired by our time with Sunset Overdrive, and then adding that, and then same thing with, all the different abilities, gadgets that he can craft. Definitely feels it like a game that we've been making. It feels like people who are Insomniac fans will also want to give it a chance.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you is the gameplay demo you showed off last year. There were quite a lot of QuickTime events. Recently in video games, they're adding more accessibility options to kind of help people who maybe aren't going to be able to hit that every time. Have you got any plans for those? Yeah,
we definitely will have accessibility options to make sure that, one is we don't have a ton of QTEs. They're very, very few and far between, kind of more for some big moments. But yeah, we definitely we want as many people to play as possible, so we will have accessibility options to make things like a QuickTime super easy, or just self-complete and stuff like that. We'll probably talk more about that in the months to come, but yeah, we want the game to be as accessible as we can.
Right. When it comes to choosing from Spider-Man, what I like about this game already is that we're not going to see Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man.
No.
We're not going to see Uncle Ben dying.
Yeah.
We're getting straight in. He's been doing this for a few years.
Yeah.
How do you then kind of pick on the choice cuts of however many dozens of years of Spider-Man?
Yeah, so in the very first month of the game of development, we said two things. One, it won't be an origin story, and those webs better attach to buildings. That was our two big, right off the bat. I think, we knew obviously we weren't going to be a movie tie-in. We weren't going to be just kind of take one of the comic storylines, which are great, and just, we said, what fits the character really well? So we looked at DNA, but then we looked at what could be a time in his life that would be interesting. Again, a lot of people have done the origin. The studio side has a 15-year-old Peter Parker, which is a great juxtaposition compared to all the other characters, so it fits really well. So I thought back to my time and my life. Well, when I graduated college, that was a very, very, the first time I was an adult now. I had to pay the bills. I was my first job. That next coming-of-age story, we thought that could be a really interesting time in Peter's life, so that's kind of, we thought that would be a good time. Obviously where he works will be a big thing in the game. We just thought that would be a really fun time to explore, both narratively, but also from a gameplay standpoint of having a long history with some of these villains that you saw last night, or introducing new people like Mr. Negative. So just kind of, my short answer is, long answer saying, it's really freaking hard, and we have a lot of talented people who are smarter than me to help figure it out.
I imagine there must be a lot of nerves working. I mean, this goes back to pre-production when you found out that you were doing Spider-Man. What's it like working with a pre-existing franchise as opposed to Ratchet & Clank, Sunset Overdrive, stuff that Insomniac created themselves?
So the joke I always say is, the greatest thing about working on Spider-Man is that we're working on Spider-Man, and the hardest thing about working on Spider-Man is that Spider-Man, because the character is so beloved by everybody. With Ratchet Resistance, you got to have to kind of help, explain it sometimes. You can say, I'm making Spider-Man, and people get it, right? But everybody comes about this character in different ways. For me, it was comics and cartoons, and then it was the movies. Some people, it's just the movies, right? It's just I learned about Spider-Man from the same Raimi movies. So we all kind of have, where do we get in? So everybody has an idea of, well, this is who is to me. But then you kind of, okay, we're not going to recreate that version that you have in your head, but what are the common characteristics? It's the relatability, it's the vulnerability, it's the worlds colliding, it's when Peter fails, Spider-Man succeeds, and vice versa. The really strong ties to the villains in his life that, they're he runs Feast, Aunt May works at Feast, you have those worlds colliding. Taking those elements, and that's what we use to make the game. And once you kind of get that the nerves kind of calm down, because you're making the game in one way or another that people will understand, they'll appreciate, because it that they love.
What was it like working in collaboration with Marvel specifically?
Oh, it's not really working with them. I mean, I will say their office is about 10 to 15 minutes from where we are in Burbank.
Okay.
So I just think of them, and this is truthfully, they're just Insomniacs who happen to work 15 minutes down the road. Bill, Mike, Eric, they are part of the dev team. When we, very rarely do we talk, obviously we talk about Marvel and the lore and the brand, but we actually just talk more about developers, are we doing this? Is it good for the story? Is it good for the game? They're just developers just like we are. So it's been super natural. I mean, they're obviously really great storytellers, and they bring a lot of experience there. And at the same time, just as it's great working with Marvel, having a partner like Sony, it's been fantastic.
And to put your own stamp on that.
They're just great. I mean, everybody just loves games, loves comics, and it's just a fun partnership.
And you get to put your own stamp on a character that, like, most of us have grown up with. What is that like?
And we say power and responsibility, right? We feel a lot of responsibility to get the character right, I will say this is the most surreal experience working on this game. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm staring at the background behind Mike's shoulder, and to walking into West Hall today and see Spider-Man. Career-wise, it's a dream come true for myself and so many Insomniac to be working on something so memorable. But at the same time, working in Insomniac, we are independent. We can work on something as amazing as Spider-Man, but then we can also be working on a VR title like Stormland, or also, we worked on, Ratchet. So we have a lot of, so we have the best of all worlds.
I'm curious, when you looked back at old Spider-Man games, I mean, this kind of, again, goes back to the drawing board, but what were some things that you thought that maybe games haven't captured? You mentioned Batman in the Arkham trilogy. I think that's widely acknowledged as, like, when video games finally got Batman right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you're hoping that's the case with Spider-Man here.
I sure hope so. I mean, I have a lot less hair on my head than I did before based on that worry.
So hopefully that was worth it.
I think the thing that what we really wanted to do is, we obviously wanted to deliver the superhero fantasy of swinging around New York City, fighting great supervillains, acrobatic combat. But I think what we really wanted to set out with this game, there's a whole nother, it's a very human story. Mm-hmm. I say it's much a Peter Parker experience as it is a Spider-Man experience. And I think when you look at the best comics, especially the movies, these movies resonate because there's a story beyond just them being in the costumes.
Right.
So we put a lot of time and effort, and which is really hard, of when Peter's not wearing the suit, when he's at work, when he's with MJ, when he's talking to Aunt May about life lessons. To us, it's so not only important to a great story, but also to a Spider-Man, Peter Parker story. So for me, if we can nail that, I think we've done something pretty special.
And another thing that's really at the heart of Spider-Man is the humor, like quip after quip after quip, and humor in video games is usually super hit or miss.
It's infuriatingly hard. Like, a lot of that was finding the voice of Spider-Man. Not only finding, what the humor is like, how often it happens. Very early on, he was just like quipping nonstop, and it got annoying. And it's nothing to do with the voice. Yuri, our actor, Spider-Man, is fantastic, and he worked a lot with us. Hey, try something different, or just what's the frequency? One thing I noticed a lot is the best things in the comics or the movies is situational humor.
Right.
It's not just a one-off quip that's related to nothing. It's actually writing it specifically for the situation. And our writers, John Paquette, Ben Arfman, Christos Gage, those guys just nailed it. And that's something we fine-tuned over the course of development. And now I feel really good that we have the voice. I feel like Yuri does a great job performing it, but our writers and our designers do a really good job of finding the right opportunities in the game to deliver it.
Right.
At this point, what was working on Spider-Man so hard? Why have games taken so long to really? I mean, the game comes out in September, but you just did it well. But what was it about Spider-Man that made it so different?
Well, I mean, you think about it. First of all, the character is so beloved that the expectations are astronomical. And you're talking to somebody who, I was someone buying those games, whether it's Spider-Man, Batman, whatever. Yeah. You have such an attachment to these characters. You want them to be great. I mean, we all go to the Marvel movies. We're like, it better be good. Yeah. I grew up on these characters. They better get it right. Yeah. And now, being a group that has to get it right is a lot. I think there's so many different facets. Swinging is so important, right? Yeah. It's like, if you don't nail that, it's like you got to get in the door, just getting in. And then it's, okay, the combat and making you feel acrobatic and making it, right away, feeling like a superhero right away, but having a level of mastery and having that sandbox environment. And then there's the whole story. Like, you have to be funny, and he has to have that human story. So there's so many different variables to get it right that that's the challenge, and that's what keeps me up at night. But luckily, we have a very talented team who they're nailing it.
You mentioned the level of mastery, and that is obviously Spider-Man's been doing this for a while. Straight out of the game, all of his abilities and stuff, and like, how are you going to onboard that to new players?
So it's great. So right now in the demo, we added some training in the demo, but over the course of the game, we dull things out. Like, so one thing is we put you in the action right away. Literally, like, the first thing in the game is you get a call, Fist Tower, get there, and you're hauling butt, swinging through New York City. And we give you enough to make you feel like a superhero.
Right.
But then over the course of the game, you'll earn XP, you'll get skill points, you'll unlock new skills, new suit mods, and then we kind of dole it over the course of time. So as you know, by the time you play the first couple hours, you're kind of in the groove.
Right.
Sorry, I thought I was having a little mic problem. Sort it out. Lucy, do you want to close this out? Because I think my mic is.
Oh, is your mic going?
Yeah. We'll have to have Lucy cut this out.
All right, and just as we got to a little cutscene as well.
Yeah, so this is actually early on in the game. You run into your old pal Shocker, who's what else, robbing a bank, and you have a little boss fight with him in this bank. And one thing to point out is, like, obviously not only from the story but also our character designs, we wanted to kind of take, respect to the tradition of the franchise. You know, that's a Shocker, classic colors, but also put our own little twist on it. So Shocker's a good example. And he basically gets really mad that you stop him, and he's decided to just destroy the bank and try to take you down. So this is one of the early boss fights in the game. One people last year were worried about if we were going to have enough villains, and hopefully last night and this demo will show people that we have plenty of villains in the game.
Plenty of villains. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming down to talk to us.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to play Spider-Man. Do you want to tell everyone when it's out?
September 7th.
I bet it feels so good to say that.
It does, because for so many times I could not say it. So yes, it feels really good.
Well, thank you again. And guys, make sure to stick around. Coming up next, we're going to have Dying Light 2.